Hi there, my name is Rob Davis, and I'm the conductor for the Southwest Washington Symphony, but I am also a horn player, and I've got my horn right here with me. Even though I usually wave my baton in front of the orchestra to help keep everyone together and keep the music going, I do sometimes get to play in the orchestra, and I was actually a player in the orchestra long before I became a conductor. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about the brass instrument family of the orchestra, and do that by using my horn here to demonstrate a little bit. All brass instruments are made from the same thing. Can you guess what? That's right, they're made from brass, just like their name implies. They're all made out of metal. But they all have different shapes and sizes, and those different shapes and sizes give them different sounds. All brass instruments are played in the same way. The player will blow air through lips and buzz the lips together. It sounds pretty funny when you do it without the instrument. It sounds pretty funny too when you do it with just the mouthpiece. This is the part that the player blows into that connects to the instrument, and it sounds kind of like a duck. So even though it sounds kind of funny all by itself, that buzzing sound that creates the vibration for a brass instrument to make sound, I think sounds pretty cool when you put it into the instrument, and that long brass pipe filters the sound and amplifies it into something beautiful. So I play the horn, as I mentioned. Some people call it the French horn, but I'm not really sure why, because it doesn't come from France. It wasn't invented in France, and I'm not sure what it has to do with France, so I like to just call it the horn. And you're probably familiar with other instruments in the brass family. The trumpet is the smallest and the highest pitched one. The horn comes next. The trombone is next after the horn in size and lowness of its sound. And the great big tuba is the basement, the lowest member of the brass family. All of these instruments, like I mentioned, are played the same by buzzing into them and blowing. But three of those instruments have valves, like these on my horn, while the trombone, you've probably seen a trombone play, and it has a slide that goes out in front to help it change the notes. One thing you might not know about brass instruments is that the keys, the buttons here on my instrument, aren't really changing the notes very much. As you can see, I only have 3 on the front and 1 for my thumb, but this instrument will play a lot more than just 4 notes. And those notes are changed by how I blow into the instrument and how the embouchure, that's the word that we use to describe the way we hold our lips when we play, all of those things change. So playing a brass instrument is a lot like singing, except for instead of vibrating on the inside with our vocal cords, we're vibrating on the outside with our lips. Watch how many notes I can play with just 1 fingering on the horn. In fact, I'll play no fingers down at all. That's a lot of notes to be able to play without moving my fingers at all, and it takes all that control of the wind, the air, the embouchure to make those notes change. In fact, a long time ago, that's how they had to change notes altogether, because the invention of these valves is only about 200 years old. And before that, brass instruments were just long tubes with no valves whatsoever. In fact, the horn specifically is probably the very oldest of all instruments, with the possible exception of the drum, because if you think about it, where else have you heard about a horn? Well, cars have horns, and boats have horns, but animals have horns too. And it's animal horns that were very first played, probably not as musical instruments, but as signaling instruments. In fact, I have one right here. This is an animal horn, just like would have been used long, long ago to make sounds. So not something really pleasant sounding necessarily, but it would be really useful if you were in a war or hunting and needed to send a signal to the rest of the members in your group. Well, over time, people started making these horns into brass shapes, and they started making them longer and longer, and realized that as they made them longer, they could change notes more easily and had more notes to play, and eventually they evolved into an instrument like the one I'm holding. This instrument is about 16 feet long. If you unwound it, it would be taller than a lot of houses. That's how much pipe is hidden away inside my horn. Well, the last thing I want to say about brass instruments is that they come in a lot of different colors as well as different shapes and sizes. If you can see my horn, it has some silver shiny parts, and it has some parts that are kind of duller and not as shiny. Well, the dull parts on my horn, like this big end that we call the bell right here, this is made out of unlacquered brass. So it's just the very natural raw brass with no polish on it and no lacquer. Lacquer is like clear paint. Well, other brass instruments are shiny and silver, like this middle part of my horn right here by the valves. Well, this means that it was covered in another metal called nickel and has lacquer on it to make it shiny and beautiful. So even though brass instruments might look a little different on the outside, they're fundamentally are all the same. They're fundamentally the same and played in the same way. Well, in another video, I'm going to play a piece for you to show you what the horn sounds like, but I've hoped you've enjoyed learning about the brass instruments, and I hope that when you go to a concert in the future, that you'll listen very attentively to hear these instruments of the brass family. Thanks so much.